What's up, hobby friends, and welcome to the tutorial for how to paint Marvel Crisis Protocol's Black Bolt. The colors I've used on this model are up on the screen now, so if you want to give the video a pause, note those down, and then we can dive right on in. The prep for our Black Bolt model is pretty straightforward. You build the model as is. I've chosen not to sub-assemble it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and prime the model with Vallejo Surface Primer Black. I'll airbrush and paint the base off camera. This will be painted to match the rest of my Marvel collection. So I'll have links in the video below or the video description below. If you want to check that out, I walk through the process on some of my older Marvel miniatures. I'm going to start with an airbrush base coat of graphite onto the base. This is just an undercoat to build up the stone color on. And then from there, once I've painted the stone, I'm going to do a 50-50 mix of dark sea blue and black. You can see that I've masked off the base and parts of the feet with some painter's tape and some sticky tack. You can do this base coat by hand if you want, but I'm going to do the next few steps with the airbrush, so this is just a little bit quicker. From there, I'll do a first highlight with pure dark sea blue, and I'm going to apply this like a zenithal highlight on top of the model. So I'm spraying top down, and the goal is to capture these highlights on the raised parts of the surfaces, leaving the shadows in that darker base coat. And then I'll do another highlight pass with a 50-50 mix of dark sea blue and green sky. Just like with the previous step, zenithal highlight. Because of Black Bolt's suit, I'm trying to skip a lot of the intermediary process, avoid doing this by hand, and with the airbrush I can just speed up the process a little bit, get the color to a midtone, and then from there, quickly highlight up to my final highlights. From there, I'll go back in with my black and dark sea blue, and I'll touch up the bottom of the boots and the feet. I'll start with a 50-50 base coat, and then soft blend it up to dark sea blue quickly by hand. From there, I'm going to start taking my dark sea blue and my green sky, and start to mix my highlights, getting progressively brighter and brighter, working towards pure green sky. The goal now here is to first start with approximately what the airbrush midtone was, and then brighten up the highlights. You can see that I'm targeting a lot of the raised folds of the muscles, the creases in the suit, and then where the muscles do join, I try and get that highlight in the bridge or that gap in between the muscles to try and connect everything together. Again, continuing to push towards pure green sky. As we get brighter and brighter, I'm going to start to focus more of my highlights on the upper part of the model. So we're looking at the tops of the chest, the absolute tops of the abs where it meets the ribcage, the helmet, shoulders, arms, and fists. And then as I work down into the thighs of the model and into the legs, I start to keep the highlights more reserved. This is going to be a black or a black-blue suit with a bit of a green highlight, but I want to have that color variety or that color interest. And to do that, I'm avoiding having too much black and color with the highlights. You can see as I work my way down into the legs, I start to get much softer with my highlights, combination of paint dilution, and then just a very light touch with the paintbrush to keep the highlights nice and soft. From there, I'll use pure black, and I'll go ahead and black line all of the joins and seams of the suit. And keep your paint nice and diluted, and use a fine tip brush. If you make any mistakes, you can go back in with your dark sea blue and green sky to correct. From there, I'll go back in with the airbrush to do a few glazes, starting with that 50-50 mix of dark sea blue and black. I've got this loaded in the airbrush in, I would say, a 5 or 6 parts water to 1 part paint dilution. And then my compressor is set to a fairly low PSI so that as I'm applying this color, very thin, very soft, almost a watercolor consistency. And then after each application of each layer, I'll use the airbrush to air dry before applying the next. Basically, I'm glazing with the airbrush. You can do this by hand. With the paintbrush, you have a little bit more accuracy, but it does take more time and requires a little bit more control to make sure that those glazes are smooth and do fade out. I think for larger areas and surfaces, I do prefer using the airbrush. And then I'm going to go in with some diluted Scarlet Red. Same dilution as the previous step, 5 or 6 parts water to 1 part paint, maybe even more. And I'm just going to target some of the deep shadows to add a bit of color. I do think I could probably have gone a little bit more diluted with my color mix. I think the red ended up being a little bit too strong, but in my later glaze steps, I do end up knocking it back with some purple. Not a big deal. Paint the skin. I'm going to start with a base coat of base flesh. I want to make sure that you get a nice even base coat, leaving a bit of that black lining around the edge of the mask and around the bottom of the jaw. I'll highlight with AK's Beige Red. Here I'm targeting the nose, making sure I delineate the nostrils, the top and bottom lips, the chin, and then the cheeks, leaving sort of a black lining for the jowls. I'll mix in progressive amounts of pastel yellow to create my highlights. Because the face is such a small part of this model, we don't have to really work in the highlights. Most of it's going to be focused on the lips, the chin, and the nose. The cheekbones are hidden by the mask, and so we don't really have to worry too much about highlighting the side of the face. I'm going to take some diluted violet red and apply a few glazes to the sides of the face and the sides of the nose to blend in my different layered highlights and to add a bit more depth back into the skin shadows. And then I'm going to take some GW Druchii Violet, pure in the airbrush, and I'm going to target all the mid and dark shadow tones of the model. You can see that I'm applying it to the underside of the suit. I do go a little bit heavier on the legs to knock back some of the red, and then as I work my way up in the torso, I target the underside of the model, get this color into the shadows, and also shade a little bit more of that face. Paint the eyes and the mouth. We're going to be using Tenebrous Gray and White Sands, effectively an off black and an off white. I'll start with the Tenebrous Gray to fill in the mouth as well as the eye sockets. I'm going to be as neat as possible, but if I do make a mistake, I can go back in with my suit and my skin colors to correct afterwards. From there, I'll take my White Sands diluted and I'll paint in the white teeth as well as the whites of the eyes. And then I'll finish off the eyes with a dot of Tenebrous Gray. Again, I'm going to be as neat as possible, but if I do make a mistake, I can go back in with the suit color and the skin color to correct. You can see here that I'm touching up the highlights around the eye sockets, top and bottom. Some of it was lost in the glazing phase, and then I'm also just correcting the eyes as well. From there, I'm going to start painting the white parts of the suit. I'm going to start with a base coat of Dark Sea Gray and apply it all over the trimming as well as the wings of his wingsuit. You'll want to apply a few coats to get a nice even base coat. From there, I'll highlight into Medium Sea Gray. I'm not really going to mix the colors. I'm going to keep it nice and diluted and just feather the colors out to create a soft blend. Really the goal here is to highlight everything on the white, leaving the deepest recesses in the original gray base coat. The next highlight step is Warm Gray. Again, diluting the color, I'm not really mixing. As I'm working my highlights up brighter and brighter, I'm focusing on more and more of the raised parts, the upper parts of the model, and less on the lower parts. It's at this stage now that I'm also going to take the time to edge highlight all of the white markings and patterns on the suit for a little bit more definition. My next few highlight steps are going from Warm Gray to Pale Sands. So here I'm going to mix a few intermediary steps to layer my colors up. The jump into Pale Sands is fairly bright, so you do want to make sure that you are mixing those steps to build up the colors smoothly without getting any sort of texturing or paint chunking. It does get easier and faster as you work your way up to pure Pale Sands because you're highlighting less and less. I think by the time I hit pure Pale Sands, I'm pretty much just focusing on the shoulders, the tops of the arms, and then the actual feathers of the wingsuit itself. And then finally, I'll finish off with a pure highlight of white. And for this, I'm just focusing on the tops of the shoulders, some top edges of the suit markings, and the symbol on his forehead. And then finally, I'm going to apply some weathering powders to the base. This is a 50-50 mix of Vallejo's dark yellow ochre and burnt umber. Something I use on all my Marvel models. It just helps to keep everything consistent, gives it a little bit of a grittier feel, and helps to unify all the bases in my entire collection, even though every model on top has a unique color palette. You want to make sure that you're applying this dry with a soft brush, and it's easier to add more than it is to take off. So apply a little bit at a time and then reevaluate at every step. Once you're happy with the result, you can take some mineral spirits and just saturate the base. This will help to fix the powders and protect it from gameplay and handling. And that completes our Black Bolt model. Once the mineral spirits are evaporated, I will paint the base trim black and apply a coat of matte varnish with Mr. Hobby's Super Clear. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a like and subscribe for more awesome weekly content. If you want to check out my other social media platforms, I'll make sure to have links in the video description below. As always, until next time, happy hobbying.